today's news.
China ups the ante, raising its tariffs on U.S. goods to 125% effective tomorrow. Order upheld in mistaken deportation.
The Supreme Court rejected the Trump administration's emergency appeal.
Back home for an American jailed in Russia. Good morning, I'm Steve Kathan. With the CBS World News Roundup, China raises the stakes in the trade war, increasing tariffs on the U.S. from 84% to 125%. U.S. tariff on China stands at 145%. CBS News White House correspondent Weijia Jiang.
At the same time, President Trump touted the historic market surge stemming from his pause on reciprocal tariffs.
We had a big day yesterday. There will always be transition difficulty.
U.S. stocks were tumbling, wiping out a third of Wednesday's gains. But the president remained optimistic about new trade agreements on the horizon.
Everybody wants to come and make a deal.
The White House says the U.S. and Vietnam have agreed to start formal discussions, and others are in the works. China is not among those countries. A top official warned if the U.S. wants a trade war, China will fight to the end.
Financial markets opened up slightly lower this morning on Wall Street. A high court setback for the Trump administration in the case of Tilmar Abrego Garcia, who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador last month. Here's CBS's Scott McFarland.
The U.S. Supreme Court upholding a lower court order that he be sent back to the U.S. Thursday night, the original judge handling the case, Judge Paula Zinnes of Maryland, ordered the Trump administration to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia to the U.S. as soon as possible.
There was an emotional homecoming last night at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland as a Russian-American woman returned to the U.S. after more than a year in a Russian prison. CBS's Charlie Dagan.
On U.S. soil, Ksenia Carolina could hardly contain her excitement as she stepped off a government plane and into the arms of her fiancé. Carolina was detained last February while visiting family in Russia. She was arrested for donating $51.80 to a U.S.-based charity that supports Ukraine. That was treason, said Russia when they sentenced her to 12 years. Her freedom came through a prisoner swap on a tarmac in Abu Dhabi. The U.S. freed a dual Russian-German citizen arrested on smuggling charges. President Trump revealed UFC CEO Dana White, who's also a friend of Carolina's fiancé, played a big role in lobbying for her case.
The ballerina who was released was at the request of a very good friend of all of ours.
Now to New York City. Correspondent Bradley Blackburn reports there's an investigation into the cause of a tourist helicopter crash that killed all 6 people on board.
Rescue boats swarmed to the spot where the helicopter went into the murky waters of the Hudson River.
I heard a big boom, thinking that it was like construction next door, but it definitely sounded like way louder.
City officials say it was a tour helicopter carrying a family from Spain. Witnesses reported seeing the aircraft break apart in midair before crashing into the water.
CBS's Chris Van Cleve says the FAA is looking into a troubling incident at an airport that's seen some close calls and a deadly collision earlier this year.
The 2 American Airlines regional jets were taxiing to the runway when their wings appeared to hit each other at Reagan National Airport.
We just heard a loud, like a boom.
Flight 5490 to Charleston had 80 people on board, while 4522 was going to New York. Among the 71 passengers and crew, at least 5 members of Congress heading home, several posting online.
They're fixing the wing now.
There were no injuries. How could this happen again at the same airport? It comes just days after the FAA replaced 3 senior managers in the Air Force Control Tower, and the head of the agency's air traffic organization accepted an early retirement.
4 minutes after the hour.
Well, that's today's news. Today's news. I didn't hear any good news, did you? I didn't think so. I guess it's all about perspective. The glass is half full. Well, as always, I'd like to thank you again for coming along with me on these Dash Cam News adventures. You know the drill. Peace, love, and all that hippie jazz. Bye-bye, everybody. It's 54 degrees in Sonoma, California.